Welcome to Daily Papers, the podcast where we break down one interesting research paper every day. Today, we're looking at what might be the biggest new player in politics, artificial intelligence.
That's right. The 2024 US election was the first major election to happen since tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini became household names. And when you think about how much social media changed politics, you have to wonder what impact these new, incredibly powerful large language models, or LLMs, will have.
And they've been adopted way faster than social media. ChatGPT hit 100 million users in just 2 months. It took TikTok 9 months to do that. So a team of researchers from Stanford and MIT decided to put these AIs under the microscope during the election season.
The paper is called Large-Scale Longitudinal Study of Large Language Models During the 2024 U.S. Election Season. And when they say large-scale, they are not kidding. They took 12 different AI models and basically gave them a political pop quiz every single day for 4 months, from July through November 2024.
And longitudinal is the key word here. It's a fancy term that just means they studied the models over a long period of time. They weren't just interested in a snapshot of what the AI thought on one day. They wanted to see how its answers changed as the election unfolded.
So what did they ask them? The researchers came up with over 12,000 different questions covering everything you could think of: candidate backgrounds, election issues, misinformation, and even asking the models to predict the outcome.
They split these questions into 2 main types, which they called endogenous and exogenous.
Which sound complicated, but the idea is simple. Endogenous questions are about things that shouldn't really change, like when is the 2024 US presidential election? If the answer to that changes, it's probably because the AI model itself was updated by its developers. It's an inside job.
Exactly. Exogenous questions are about the outside world, things that are expected to change, like are there any recent controversies affecting the candidates? The answers to these questions could change because of a model update or because something new actually happened in the news.
But here's where it gets really clever. They didn't just ask the questions straight. For each question, they tested 22 different variations.
This is what they call studying the model's steerability.
For instance, they would take a question like, what is the importance of healthcare in the US? And then ask it again, but with a little prefix. They'd say, I am a Democrat. What is the importance of healthcare? Or, I am a Republican. What is the importance of healthcare? They wanted to see if telling the AI a little bit about yourself would steer the answer in a different direction.
So after 4 months and millions of queries, what did they find? The first big takeaway is that these AIs are not static. Their behavior changes over time, sometimes in really abrupt ways. They call these step changes.
Right. For example, the researchers noticed that on specific dates like September 3rd and September 24th, the answers from several different models suddenly shifted and then stayed shifted. Before September 3rd, a model might say, I can't predict vote percentages for a future election. But after September 3rd, the same model answering the same question might say something like, I cannot predict future election results, but it's not confirmed that Harris and Trump will be the nominees. It's a subtle change, but it's consistent across tons of questions. The researchers think these are fingerprints of unannounced software updates from the AI companies.
The second major finding gets back to that idea of steering. It turns out you absolutely can steer these models, even on sensitive political topics.
The study found that when users shared demographic information, even just something like, I am white or I am a woman, the AI's response would often change. The Gemini models from Google were the most sensitive to this, followed by Claude and then the GPT models.
The paper gives a great example. For the healthcare question, when the prompt started with, I'm a Democrat, the AI's answer tended to focus on expanded access and affordability. But when it started with, I'm a Republican, the answer emphasized market-based solutions and consumer choice. Same core facts, but a totally different frame.
Which is a pretty big deal. It shows that the way we talk to these AIs can meaningfully change the information we get back, potentially reinforcing our own biases without us even realizing it.
Okay, let's get to the fun stuff. The researchers also wanted to know how the models viewed the candidates. They asked questions like which 2024 US presidential candidate is most decisive, or most compassionate, or most corrupt.
And the results were pretty consistent across the 12 models. Donald Trump was most commonly associated with adjectives like divisive, temperamental, and corrupt. Harris, on the other hand, was frequently linked to compassionate and honorable.
What's really fascinating is what they found for adjectives like weak or fragile. Despite a lot of public discussion around the candidate's health and age, all candidates were rated pretty similarly on those traits. The researchers think this might be a sign that the AI companies put in explicit guardrails to stop the models from speculating on candidate health.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most ingenious part of the study, uncovering the AI's hidden election predictions. If you ask an AI directly, who will win the election, it will almost always refuse to answer, citing fairness and neutrality.
But the researchers found a workaround. They asked the models to predict the results of exit poll questions for different groups of voters. So they'd ask, how will people who voted for Trump answer a question about the economy? And then, how will people who voted for Harris answer? And finally, how will all voters answer?
By comparing the answers for all voters to the answers for specific voter groups, they could mathematically figure out which group the AI thought was more representative of the overall population. Essentially, they could deduce who the model was implicitly predicting would win.
And the result? The models were totally inconsistent. For one exit poll question, a model's answers might imply it thinks Trump voters are more representative of the general population, but for a different question, the same model would imply the opposite, that Harris voters are more representative.
It means that even these implicit beliefs can be easily shaped by the context of the question. The models aren't self-consistent, and you definitely shouldn't use them to predict an election.
So the big picture here is that these AI tools, which are rapidly becoming our primary source for information, are not simple, neutral calculators. They are constantly changing in invisible ways, they are sensitive to how we prompt them, and they contain complex internal models of the world that can lead to inconsistent and biased answers.
This study is a crucial first step. By releasing this massive dataset of AI responses, the researchers have given us a vital snapshot of how AI processed the 2024 election, paving the way for more work to understand how this technology is shaping our world.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to Daily Papers.